Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Cover 2 podcast. I'm Jared Smith.
And I'm Nenad.
And we're happy to be with you on this Tuesday.
Yes.
Normally we record the show on Wednesday, but this week we are changing things up, bringing our podcast to you a little bit early so that you can get our Tuesday morning quarterback edition of all of this week's NFL games, college football games. We have a lot to talk about. We're going to get started with the Chiefs and the Rams and break down that huge matchup from this weekend. We're going to get into some contenders and pretenders in the NFL. We're going to talk about Daniel Jones and that great win that the Giants had over the Buccaneers, as well as some other quarterbacks who were stepping in for their injured teammates. Let's see, we're going to talk about Antonio Brown and Jalen Ramsey.
Got a lot to yes.
We do. And then, of course, to end the show, there was a huge college football matchup this weekend with Georgia and Notre Dame, two potential national championship contenders. We will give you our thoughts on that game and if Notre Dame is still in contention
of course,
after losing. So all that much more. But we want to get started with the NFL and the Chiefs and the Ravens, the most highly anticipated game of Week 3. Obviously, the Chiefs ended up winning that game 33-28. Let's just jump right into it, Nick. What did you think of that game overall, and was it the outcome that you expected?
Yeah, I thought the Chiefs would win. They've looked unstoppable in their first two games, and they looked somewhat unstoppable in this game as well. I think the game kind of came off to me a little bit clunky. Now, I did watch some of it live. I did watch a lot of it on Red Zone just because there's so many games to watch. But some of the major plays in the game, some of those lob up Hail Mary type passes Lamar Jackson threw to keep drives open kind of kept the game a little closer than it should have been. But overall, great game. The Ravens are very formidable in my opinion. And the Chiefs, even without Tyreek Hill and the starting running back Damian Williams, still were able to put 33 points on the board on one of the best defenses in the NFL and win the game and go to 3-0. Amazing from both teams, but the Chiefs are just unreal again.
Listen, the Chiefs have Patrick Mahomes, right? Reigning NFL MVP
yes.
in his rookie year.
And he's playing like it again this year.
The dude is out of this world. I think you can argue right now that he is the best quarterback in the NFL right now. Now, I'm not saying, I'm not talking about his career, obviously, because that's very short. So I'm not saying that he's, his career is better than Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady or anything like that. But as of right now, in this current moment, I feel that Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the NFL. And
I think he's the best player.
And I think he's proving it. And along with Andy Reid's system, the way that they scheme up ideas and come up with, they're like a college offense. And I feel like a lot of college schemes are integrating themselves into the NFL, and the Chiefs just so happen to be doing that better than anyone else, right? The way that they motion the receiver from right to left and get a defense looking one way and then they throw it the other way. You mentioned it, the Ravens were arguably the best defense in the NFL coming into this week's matchup, and they gave up 33 points, and the Chiefs really made it look easy. Now, the Chiefs' defense is not that great, so the Ravens were able to put up points as well. But from an offensive standpoint, the Chiefs just look completely unstoppable. And like you mentioned, Tyreek Hill, their deep threat, arguably their best offensive weapon other than Patrick Mahomes, isn't even playing.
Yeah.
Right? So this team is so scary right now, and I think we can do nothing but continue to give props to this whole Chiefs team for the way that they've come together. And I said this in our NFL season's prediction show before the season started. We know what the Chiefs offense is going to do. This is really about the Chiefs defense, and if they can just be average, because last year they were horrible. They were Swiss cheese. They couldn't stop a nosebleed, right? And I feel that you're right. That's why they did not get to the Super Bowl. If that defense can just be average and give up 25 points or less, this offense is going to put up points regardless who's on the field. So, and I think that's what we're seeing right now from this Chiefs defense. They're not great. They're not even really that good because they're still a little suspect. But if they can just get stops in certain key situations, I don't know how this Chiefs team loses.
Yeah, it's kind of, I think the main answer is the defense allowing too many points. And when they have these big-time matchups against a New England, even against a Houston Texans team that can score a lot when Deshaun Watson's getting after it. That's when we're going to kind of see, okay, there's the Chiefs' flaws. The Chiefs are super impressive. Like you said, it's pretty much down to their defense to step up. They might be adding some different pieces later down the year. I think they should too, because this is their year.
Jalen Ramsey?
Maybe. Well, he is kind of sick though, isn't he?
We'll get into that a little bit later.
Well,
that's called a tease.
Yeah. No, but so I just think looking at this game, the Ravens are very competitive, and they will more than likely win the AFC North, so they will have a bye, and they will be third or fourth seed in the playoffs. The Chiefs potentially are the best team in the NFL coming out of this game.
So you answered the question before I could even ask. I did want to switch and talk about the Ravens for a minute. I'm currently looking at their schedule in their next 3 games. They are now getting into division play, where they have a home game against the Browns next week, and then they travel to Pittsburgh in 2 weeks, and in 3 weeks they have another home matchup against the Bengals. So even though they did lose, they didn't get blown out, and you and I can agree that the Ravens are still very formidable. That defense is not going anywhere, and Lamar Jackson is only going to continue to get better and flourish as a passer, because we all know what he can do as far as a running quarterback. So looking at these next 3 games, all against division opponents, I'm looking at 3 wins right here, and I'm looking at the Ravens getting right back on track. And in a few weeks, we're not even going to remember this loss against the Chiefs.
No, and they need these 3 wins, because looking at the schedule, they play at the Seahawks after this, and then the New England Patriots after a bye. So that does help. But, coming up after these 3 division games, which would have been a lot more difficult, seems like, before the season, now look like 3 absolute wins if you really are going to be this one of these quote-unquote best teams in the NFL.
And I absolutely feel like they are.
Yeah, no
doubt.
I do too. When you have a defense that's led by guys like Earl Thomas, it's that you know that your defense is formidable at that point. So as long as the offense can do what they're doing, it's the exact opposite of the Chiefs, where the defense should kind of lead that team, and the offense just has to compete at a certain level.
Well, let's not forget, just like I'm giving a lot of credit to the Chiefs' offense and their head coach Andy Reid and the way that they come up with great schemes, I think we have to do the same thing with the Ravens' defense, because let's not remember, yes, they did add Earl Thomas in free agency, one of the best safeties in the league, no doubt. But they lost some key pieces on this defense. They lost Terrell Suggs, who's been with the Ravens for his entire career. He's now in Arizona with your Cardinals. They lost C.J. Mosley, who was their middle linebacker, the one that was making all the defensive calls, right? So they lost some leadership and a lot of key pieces at specific spots on that defense, right? So the fact that they have been able to come back and really not miss a beat, I think we have to give a lot of credit to the Ravens defensive coaches and coordinators for being able to come up with great schemes. And like I said, they just ran into a juggernaut in the Chiefs this week. But I fully expect this Ravens team to come back next week against a division opponent, against the Browns, and say, listen, that, giving up 33 points will not happen again. Moral of the story, Chiefs are undefeated, Ravens are 2-1. Both of these teams are still legitimate, and Nick and I fully expect these teams to make huge runs as the regular season continues on into the postseason.
Exactly. And speaking of undefeated, there are 7 teams in the NFL this year that have not lost a game, including his Dallas Cowboys. My Arizona Cardinals have not won a game this season still. So there's these.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's fine. I just want to play the Dolphins, we just get one bit. But no, so we're gonna play a little pretenders and contenders. We did this 2 weeks ago after the first week when a lot of teams impressed us. Now we've seen a little bit more football. We've seen a lot of these teams play a little bit more difficult opponents. Right. Ravens don't get to blow out the Dolphins 59-10 every single weekend. Now they play a legitimate team, and we see what they do. So we have 7 teams here. A lot of these teams we realize are actually contenders, and we're not going to lament on them too much. But we are going to go over some surprising teams, and we're going to start with the most surprising, and that is the Buffalo Bills at 3-0. They get a big win against, I am blanking right now on who they beat this weekend. They came from behind and beat the Bengals in a tough game in their first home game. They've beaten the Giants, and they've beaten the Jets. Not the hardest, most difficult schedule, maybe the easiest out of any team this season. Jared, Are the Bills pretenders or contenders?
This is probably one of the toughest questions as far as this segment goes.
Yeah.
Listen, when you think about it, when you start the season off or when you get your schedule and you're like, oh my gosh, we're starting our first 2 games on the road. Well, really for the Bills, they didn't have to go too far because they played against the Jets in week 1, which is at MetLife Stadium in New York, right? And then week 2, they went right back to MetLife Stadium and played against the Giants.
And they're already based in New York anyway, so
exactly.
It's not,
they didn't really have to go too far, and then they get their next 2 matchups at home. They did beat the Bengals, like Nick just mentioned, and then they do have their first real test of the season this upcoming week when the New England Patriots come to town. For sake of argument, I'm going to say that the Bills are contenders.
Nice.
And I'm saying that for one reason only, and that is because I am praying and wishing that the Bills will be competitive enough throughout the regular season to challenge the New England Patriots for the division. Now, I may sound crazy, and you're going to say, Jared, this is the Buffalo Bills, and I'm going to say, yes, I know, but we are, week 3 heading into week 4, and so far the Bills have surprised me. Even though they've gone up against lesser opponents, at the end of the day, their job is to go out and win games, regardless of who they're playing. And they have proven that, right? You're supposed to beat up on the teams that are weaker, and the Bills have done that. So I think instead of us sitting here and talking just about, they've had a weak schedule in a sense, or the Jets obviously were down to their 3rd-string quarterback, the Bengals didn't have A.J. Green. We can make up all these excuses as to why the Bills are 3-0. Maybe we should just give them credit for actually playing well and doing what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
So for right now, I'm going to say the Bills are contenders, and so far their defense looks very formidable, and their offense is doing enough. Their rookie running back, Devin Singletary, who was out this past week because of a hamstring injury, I think he is the future of this team. Let's remember, right before the season started, the Bills released LaShawn McCoy, right? Who we all know has been a very formidable running back in this league. Devin Singletary is a name to watch out for. I think he's going to be the future, and it's going to be Josh Allen and Devin Singletary leading this Bills team going forward.
Yeah, a lot of guys surprising. The defense has played better. Like you said, Devin Singletary coming out of nowhere. And the biggest thing is Josh Allen is really progressed his 2nd year. Although they came down to the last couple drives of the Jets, Josh Allen made a big play. In the Cincinnati game, Josh Allen made multiple plays on 3rd down and stuff. That's the type of stuff that will win you the close games. And when you're in close games with good teams, you then know that you have a quarterback, a young quarterback that's already doing veteran quarterback things. And that's the best thing that Bills fans should know right now, is that you guys have a quarterback for the future that is playing with a little bit lesser talent and still performing and still winning 3 games in a row in the NFL. That's a lot of teams cannot say that right now, including the Baltimore Ravens with Lamar Jackson. So looking at their schedule, it's interesting because I don't think of the Bills as a legit, as a 3-0 team. So looking at their schedule, I was a little bit meaner on some of the teams that they're going to lose to. But, their schedule isn't that difficult. Besides, obviously, 2 matches with New England that you can never expect to win. Really, they play Baltimore at home, which could be very interesting, and they play at Dallas, which is more than likely a loss. But the rest of the schedule is, it's Tennessee, it's Miami, it's Washington, it's Miami again. They obviously play the Jets one more time. Pittsburgh now doesn't have Big Ben. Denver does not look like a very good team. So there's a lot of, and then Philadelphia is underperformed this year too. So there's a lot of wins that you wouldn't have expected. I don't see this Bills team, obviously, competing with the Patriots, because I think they will lose 6 or 7 games this season. But the playoffs, it's looking like they probably.
So what you're saying is they're contenders.
They're contenders. Contenders for the playoffs, not for the.
Who would have thought?
I know.
Buffalo Bills being contenders after week 3.
We probably should give more credit to, because they were in the playoffs 2 years ago with a completely different quarterback. It's a credit to this coaching staff. This very true job. Sean McDermott, I think, probably deserves the most credit, along with Josh Allen and the defense as well. All right, switching teams. The Green Bay Packers are also 3-0.
Another interesting team.
They have a solid star quarterback by the name of Aaron Rodgers. They have beat some formidable teams this season. I'll start this one. I think the Green Bay Packers are absolutely contenders. They have beaten the Bears on the road in the first game of the season, 100th year of the NFL, all that stuff. They have beaten the Minnesota Vikings, who have looked really good this season, and then they beat the Broncos, and were kind of handily winning that game most of the time. So I think this team's absolutely contenders. I think the matchup of Aaron Rodgers and Matt LaFleur has so far worked. I think Rodgers has kind of refreshed himself away from the McCarthy BS and all that stuff, and I think this team is very dangerous. And I'll go on to say that because of the way the defense is played, I think this team potentially is a Super Bowl contender as well.
I think you hit the nail on the head, and this is about this defense right now, right? They brought on Zadarius Smith and Preston Smith, 2 outside linebackers to rush the passer. I think the key thing for this defense is that they've stayed relatively healthy so far for most of the year. They drafted Rashawn Gary out of Michigan to kind of beef up that defensive line. And their secondary, which in the past 3 or 4 years, they've spent first and second round picks, top priority picks on their secondary, and those guys are finally staying healthy.
Yep.
The problem is the last 2 to 3 years, they've all been injured, and they've had to go to their 5th, 6th, and 7th corners and go out in the street to try to find guys to cover these receivers. The fact that this defense is actually healthy, I think I'm more impressed with the defense. I think that the Packers are definitely contenders, and I'm actually scared of the Packers because here's why. The Packers are still they're still stuck with their offense right now. They're still trying to figure out what works and what doesn't.
Yeah.
So the fact that this team is 3-0 and they're still in idle mode on offense.
Having beat good teams.
When they get that gear into drive and they actually get into a rhythm offensively, and Aaron Rodgers starts to figure out what Matt LaFleur likes, and they start to get into more of a rhythm, I am scared for what this Packers team will do if this defense as a collective unit can stay healthy. I think this Packers team is very scary, and I think I'm going to have to eat my words because I remember on our predictions show I said that the Chicago Bears are going to be the only team coming out of this division. Well, as of right now, I'm totally wrong. And I know that the Cowboys play the Packers in 2 weeks. That's going to be a huge matchup. But no, this Packers team, the more that they continue to grow and the more that Matt LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers stay on the same page, it is only going to get better. Because if you think about it, if you actually go back and watch these games, their offense has been pretty sloppy.
It
hasn't really been flowing well. So that is what I'm scared about the most. They haven't even played well.
And they've also played, you look at the team, they played Bears defense, which is probably the best defense in all of the NFL.
Arguably.
Minnesota,
another great defense.
Maybe the best NFL defense. And the Denver Broncos have always had a pretty solid defense.
Right.
So there's the other thing is that not only are they winning these games, but they're winning these games and defeating these defenses that will win these other teams' games, and they are beating these teams. So
watch out, people.
Yeah,
I'm just saying.
Absolutely.
Packers are scary.
Now, same division. There's another undefeated team. I shouldn't do that because they're undefeated, but they do have one tie, and this is a very interesting one. It's the Detroit Lions, who are 2-0-1 to 1 tied my Arizona Cardinals in Week 1. Jared, are the Detroit Lions contenders or pretenders?
They're pretenders. Listen, this is the Lions we're talking about, okay? The Lions, the Detroit Lions. When was the last time the Lions were good? When was the last time the Lions made the playoffs?
I mean, have they ever really been?
I'm sorry. The Lions are a regular season team. Matthew Stafford will put up numbers for days. He will be in that MVP discussion every year as long as he stays healthy. The defense has actually played a lot better, and I feel like that has a lot to do with head coach Matt Patricia and the fact that he's in his second year.
They've gotten some good players.
Right, he brought over Trey Flowers, who was formerly in New England when he coached him as a defensive coordinator. So he's been able to bring over some more of his guys that fit their specific system. So kudos to them for coming out and playing well so far. They tied against the Cardinals in Week 1, which is still stuck in my brain and a reason why I'm not giving this team a little more credit.
Yeah.
And then they beat the Chargers in Week 2. This past week, they did beat the Eagles in Philadelphia. That was a huge win. The Eagles were out some of their top receiving threats on offense, but still, I don't think anyone expected the Lions to go into Philadelphia and win. I will give them credit for that. Their next opponent is against the Chiefs. That's a loss.
Yeah.
And then they go to Green Bay. That's probably a loss. And then they're home against Minnesota. These next 3 games, we're gonna really see if this Lions team is for real or if they're just who we thought they were, which is they'll put up numbers in the regular season, but when the games really matter or when they're playing teams that are formidable, they never seem to live up to that hype. So until I see them do this consistently against great competition, I'm going to sit back and calmly say that they are pretenders.
No, I think this team's absolutely pretenders. If they go out and beat the Chiefs this weekend, I will change my mind completely. But when you look at it, they completely blew the game against the Arizona Cardinals. I watched the whole game. The Cardinals should not have had the chance to come back and all that. And to be honest, they should have lost. I mean, the Cardinals dropped a wide open interception at about the 20-yard line with a couple seconds to go that probably would have led to a game-winning field goal. The Chargers, for some reason, are just have found ways to lose games this season. Detroit only, they found a way to win, but I blame that more on the Chargers. And last week, the Eagles, this last Sunday, the Eagles lost that game more than the Detroit won it because of their drops and because of lack of blocking in that game from the Eagles. The San Francisco 49ers. Jared, I have no idea how this team is 3-0.
Man, probably the most surprising 3-0.
Yeah, and I mentioned the Bills, but you're right. I think this team might be a little more surprising. This is a team that is one of those teams, again, has had a pretty easy schedule to start the season. They played the Buccaneers away, but the Buccaneers just seem to not, I don't know what to think of that team. They beat them by 2 touchdowns. They beat the Bengals pretty handily, but again, the Bengals are one of the worst teams in the NFL, and then they play a very depleted Steelers team, an underwhelming Steelers team, and I don't know how they won that game, but they won it. So I am going to say they're pretenders because the way they played on the field. I think they have talent, but a lot of these games have been very clunky. They're winning them, but they're not playing good defenses at all. So I just think when you look at their schedule coming up, they're at home against Cleveland, but Cleveland has something to prove, right? They got to play the Rams twice still this season. They had to play Carolina, Seattle twice, at New Orleans when Drew Brees is back, at Baltimore, Green Bay. I don't see this team eventually making the playoffs, so I'm going to call them pretenders.
I'm going to say pretenders, and it's because I'm looking at their schedule down the road, and like you mentioned, they play the Saints when Drew Brees is coming back. They have to play Seattle twice. They play the Rams twice.
They also, low-key, have not beat the Cardinals for 6 years. So
there you go. So they don't have a good track
record.
More
than likely, they probably will lose to the Cardinals somehow. One of the games they play them, even though those should be 2 wins technically, they, for some reason in their heads, have not been able to beat the Cardinals in the last couple of games.
Here's the thing for this team. And, Jimmy G is a good quarterback, very formidable. George Kittle is, without a doubt, their best offensive weapon at tight end. I want to sit here and actually focus on their defense, and I think their defense is why they've been winning. And they should, because if you go back and look at their last 7 or 8 drafts, they've spent them basically all on either defensive linemen or linebackers, not to mention the fact that they traded for D Ford and gave up a first-round pick this year. So their defensive front Richard Sherman is loaded with first-round talent and all-pro talent. So finally, this 49ers defense is actually living up to expectations. Because like I said, when you look on paper, you're like, wow, there's nothing but first-round talent on here. How come they have not, why have they not been successful? And so I think we need to give credit to this defense for playing well. We'll just see if that can hold up once they start playing better competition and better quarterbacks. So I'm going to say that they're pretenders. But you know what? Good for the 49ers. Another team that, just because their schedule has looked weak or they haven't played great opponents, they're doing what they're supposed to do and they're winning. The Steelers didn't have Big Ben, so they're going to be underdogs in most games. The 49ers went out and handled their business. They beat the Buccaneers, which is a bad team. They beat the Bengals, which is a bad team. Do what you're supposed to do, and we have to give you credit for it.
I'll say one thing about these 3 games, though. They made a lot of mistakes in those games, too, which they're not going to be able to get away with against these good teams.
Right, which is why...
They had 5 turnovers against Steelers. They won because the Steelers have no offense. I'm sorry, Mason Rudolph might be the future, but he's not the now. We'll move on. There's 4 teams that we do think are contenders. That's the Dallas Cowboys, the Los Angeles Rams, the Chiefs, and the Patriots. there's elements of all these teams that make them even more contenders of what they are. I do want to ask you though, and I think there is there's a big game or two for the Dallas Cowboys that's coming up that I think will really tell us whether they are, really who they've been at the beginning of the season, because they have had a very easy schedule to start the season. Miami, Washington, and New England after what Washington did last night. Yeah, exactly. They played the Eli Giants, too. They did not play the Daniel Jones Giants. And what Washington did last night, you're looking at three of the worst teams you possibly could play. They play at New Orleans. New Orleans looked great, even without Drew Brees. And then Green Bay. Do you kind of agree with me that they need to really show out in these next two games to kind of make our minds think more positively about the Cowboys?
Listen.
As a fan, too.
This is not even as a homer pick right here. I'm putting my bias aside. This Cowboys team is loaded with talent on both sides of the ball, right?
Absolutely.
They are very young, but they do have a lot of experience coming back from last year where they had a lot of rookies stepping up. So I am going to say that this team did exactly what they were supposed to do. They came out and they beat the teams that they were supposed to do.
And they've been beating them down.
And they've been beating them down, right? So obviously last week against the Dolphins in the first half, they didn't have a great first half, and many, people were like, oh my gosh, what are the Cowboys doing? How is this still even a game?
The Dolphins competed.
They came out in the second half and they put it on the Dolphins like they were supposed to. Now, I really wish that Drew Brees was playing for the Saints, because I think this would have just even been a better matchup. The Cowboys whooped on the Saints last year when the Saints came into town. Now, obviously, this game is in New Orleans this year. We'll see that home crowd is always going to be cooking, especially on a Sunday night. So that's going to be a big test for the Cowboys. And then the following week, the Packers come into town, like you just mentioned, with Aaron Rodgers, and we'll see what happens there. But I think regardless, as long as the Cowboys are competitive in these games, I think that's going to prove or show all that we need to know about this Cowboys team, right? I don't see this Cowboys team getting blown out. I don't see this Cowboys team losing focus. I think they understand that, yes, they've played three lesser opponents to start the season, but that means nothing to them. I think they're looking at their next opponent, which is the New Orleans Saints, and saying, we just saw what they did when they went into Seattle and beat a very good Russell Wilson team. We're not taking them lightly at all. So I think this Cowboys team will be competitive in all of their big-time matchups.
I personally do think that Dallas needs to win most of these games. I know they're not going to go 16-0, and that's a ridiculous thing to expect, but when they go in New Orleans without Drew Brees, I think they need to win this game.
No, they're expected to win. They're favored.
And when Green Bay comes to town, I know we've been talking a lot about Green Bay, but they need to win those games at home. I don't ever expect anybody to beat the Patriots, so I'm not going to put them on. But, maybe a little redemption against the Rams later this season, too. I want to see them win these games because, including last year in the playoffs and in the past, they haven't won the biggest games of the season.
True.
And so I just want to see that happen before I truly call them Super Bowl contenders. But for the playoffs, they're going to win the NFC East easy, and they are going to be the 1 or 2 seed.
I think the NFC East is not wrapped up, but it's. I mean, listen.
No, it's wrapped up. Philadelphia is not competing.
You have the Giants and the Redskins right now that are both sitting. The Redskins are 0-3. Giants are 1-2. The Eagles are 1-2, and they're on a short week. The Eagles are traveling to Green Bay to play Thursday night, right, against the Packers. That is just a recipe for disaster right there. So the Cowboys could be heading into this Week 4 matchup against the Saints, looking at a 1-3 Eagles team, a 1-2 Giants team, and an 0-3 Redskins team. So the Cowboys handle business on Thursday and go to 4-0. They are just continuing to
put your bets.
Put
your bets down.
Quickly on Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown does not understand negotiations and contracts, in my opinion, right? He's just coming out and saying whatever's on his mind, right? He wears his heart on his sleeve. And I think that's what
you saw some of the tweets he said, too.
Right. He came out a few days ago and basically said, I am done with the NFL. He did not say the word retire. He said that I'm not playing in the NFL anymore. I am re-enrolling in Central Michigan, where he went to college, to get his degree. You know what? Fantastic. Good for you, Antonio Brown. Maybe you can learn something about business or negotiating or just how to be a damn human being in a business work-like setting, right? Here's the thing. Until we know what is going to legally happen with Antonio Brown and what if and when the NFL decides to suspend him, depending on what their investigation says, There is no NFL team out there that is going to touch Antonio Brown.
Zero.
Right?
Yeah.
If Antonio Brown is not committed of any crimes and the NFL either does not suspend him or gives him a 1 or 2 game suspension, then I guarantee teams will call, and I guarantee he will be back in the league suiting up for an NFL team. But if there is legal action against him, or if the NFL decides that to suspend him for a lengthy time of like 6 or 8 games, then I think, yes, his time in the NFL could potentially be up. But as of right now, I don't think we can sit here and say, oh, yes, he's coming back, or yes, he's not, because we don't know what the legal process is. So from that standpoint alone, I think go back to school, handle your business on that side, and unfortunately, your fate is in the hands of the law right now. As far as Jalen Ramsey goes, this is all a tactic to where he can keep himself healthy and not practicing. And I think they're at a stalemate because the Jaguars have come out and unequivocally said they want to keep their star corner, and the Jaguars owner is willing to pay him big bucks, which he is going to get regardless of where he is playing. I think Jalen Ramsey's just fed up with the situation. He wants to go to a winning team. He's tired of losing. I mentioned that the Chiefs that need to jump on this opportunity and give up a first-round pick or whatever it takes to get that star corner and help out your defense. But I don't see Jalen Ramsey being a Jaguar much longer, and I think he is, doing what he thinks is best, which is saying he's sick and staying away from the team while they try to work out a trade.
I think the 2 teams, there have been other teams, but I think the 2 teams that have been mentioned a lot are the Baltimore Ravens and Kansas City Chiefs. I think he might be looking at them and being like, hey, they're in the same conference as me, and they are probably more likely going to play. They're going to the playoffs, and they're going to have a chance in the Super Bowl, especially if I'm added to these rosters. So I think that's kind of probably what he's thinking, and that's why he's not thinking about the money in these situations, because he's like, should I take this money for the Jaguars and potentially not make the playoffs for another 5 years, or let me try to go win a Super Bowl this year, and then I'll figure it out later. I do think he will get traded, because I think eventually these owners and these GMs realize, hey, we can get a lot of value out of this guy, and we don't need this disgruntled employee, much like the Steelers did with Antonio Brown.
We need to move on, but here's the thing. The Jaguars go the next few weeks, and they don't start winning games, and it looks like their season is lost.
Yep.
They're going to want to trade Jalen Ramsey, get a first-round pick for next year, and have potentially 2 first-round picks to start to rebuild this team. So this is all strategy, in my opinion, and I think, like I said, the next few weeks, if the Jaguars don't win games, I think we will see a trade happen.
No, I agree. Okay, so this week was big for new quarterbacks. There was 4 QBs that played for the first time this season. Daniel Jones, Teddy Bridgewater, Mason Rudolph. Started for the first time this season. Mason Rudolph and Kyle Allen. I think we don't need to go over the fact that Daniel Jones played fantastic in his debut.
Right.
He did technically win them the game, although I think the Tampa Bay kicker won won the Giants the game.
Right.
But Daniel Jones put them on their back and scored what ended up being the winning touchdown. The rest of the quarterbacks, Kyle Allen played great, but the Cardinals defense looked atrocious in that game. A lot of wide open receivers. And Bridgewater and Rudolph kind of managed the game well, but they didn't take over the game. So what was your biggest takeaway from all the QBs this weekend, the new ones that we hadn't seen play?
Mine was very, very easy, and it was Kyle Allen and this Panthers offense. And I don't know if it was the lack of Arizona Cardinals defense or the fact that offensive coordinator Norv Turner was just playing to the strengths of what Kyle Allen does. Maybe this game is... Kyle Allen, by the way, 4 touchdown passes, 0 interceptions, 0 turnovers, and looked like a legitimate starting NFL quarterback, right? And it was actually very interesting. Kyle Allen and Kyler Murray at one point were teammates at Texas A&M before they both ended up transferring. So that was a fun kind of matchup between 2 guys who know each other right there. But for this Panthers team that had 2 home games to start the year, lost both of those games, and going back to last season, I believe they lost 9 straight games with Cam Newton at the helm. Finally said, okay, Cam, you're not healthy. We're going to bench you. And the fact that Josh Allen came in and looked exponentially better than what Cam Newton did, who Cam Newton, by the way, former MVP of the NFL and led his team to the Super Bowl just 4 years ago, right? So for everyone who's saying, oh, do the Panthers need to move on from Cam Newton? Stop it, okay? Because when Cam Newton is healthy, the guy is still Superman. The problem is he's coming off of shoulder surgery and his foot is injured right now. The reports are saying that he has a Liz Frank injury. And so whether it's 3 weeks, whether it's 4, I think the Panthers are comfortable with what Allen did in this game to say, Cam Newton, you need to rest and get yourself healthy, and then come back and see if we can make a run at this thing.
Yeah, the interesting thing about this whole Kyle Allen experiment is that their schedule kind of works out for them to have Cam Newton be hurt at this time of the season. And I say that because they play the Cardinals, then they're at the Texans, they're versus the Jaguars, they're at the Buccaneers in London, and then they have a bye. And I think after that bye is when Cam Newton more than likely should be healthy enough to come back. I don't think you throw him in that London game at all. That's just a bad
travel.
It's just not smart. And if they do that, that you have other issues.
Unless he's healthy, which
but he's not going to be. He's not going to be healthy. He's not going to actually be healthy this whole season. He's just going to be healthier. And I think that you're right. When Cam Newton can actually plant his foot and when his shoulder feels, solid, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the world. But when he's not, he's one of the worst. And I'll just come out and say that. His percentage of missing wide receivers is literally the worst in the entire league. So that's a quarterback's job, is to fill them all the way receiver. And if he's missing all of them, that's not good. So I just think that for now, Kyle Allen is a sufficient backup. But, come that week 7 or week 8, whenever that bye is happening, the Cam Newton more than likely should come in this game. Interesting fact about Kyle Allen before we switch to Daniel Jones is he played at Arizona. He actually was born and raised and went to high school in Scottsdale.
Right.
So he actually was it was a hometown game. And his next game is at Houston. He played for the University of Houston and also played at Texas A&M, which is less than 100 miles away from the city of Houston. So another homecoming, the perfect start to a schedule you could ever have for 2 road games.
That's pretty interesting. That's pretty cool.
Exactly. And then he has 2 home games. Well, 1 home game and a game in London. But so, very interesting stuff there. And we'll see how well Kyle Allen plays against some better defenses. And I'll say that, my team's defense played atrocious this last Sunday. So let's give him some more leeway and see what happens. Daniel Jones obviously gets the big win. Played great. His stats, I had his stats right here. To list them off because they were very impressive. 336 pass yards, 4 TDs, including 2 rush TDs, including the game winner. Also had 2 fumbles in the game, though. So I think a lot of people are singing his praises, but he still did make some mistakes in this game. He has no talent around him, and Saquon Barkley got hurt in this game, so really had no talent around him. It was an impressive start. But I'm telling you, man, the later the season gets and they start getting beat up by some of these good teams and they play the Cowboys again and they play some of these other solid teams, it's not going to look as good as this. Again, we were saying Tampa Bay's defense is very weird. It just performs at certain times and doesn't perform at other times. This is one of the games where they didn't perform. Jameis Winston made some horrendous plays in this game as well. One of the worst passes I've ever seen over the middle by him, too. So let's pump the brakes on the whole Daniel Jones is the savior of New York City and he's better than any rookie that's come out. Okay, I get it. The New York media wants to say all this stuff, but he played a subpar defense. He did make mistakes in this game. Although he played well, we have to see more from him, in my opinion.
I'm not even pumping the brakes. I'm not even pumping him up to begin with.
Okay.
There's multiple reasons why I, am sitting here very reserved and not jumping on that bandwagon. Here's the thing. It was Daniel Jones' first ever start. So even though the Buccaneers don't have a great defense, I don't care what team they were playing, there wasn't a whole lot of film to go off of to get ready and scheme for Daniel Jones. Even though the Giants going into this week had already said, I believe it was Tuesday, that they were going to start Daniel Jones, the Buccaneers didn't have a whole lot of film to go off of, NFL film to go off of to say, okay, this is what Daniel Jones does well, this is what he doesn't do well. So I think the Buccaneers throughout the game were having to kind of scheme new things and going on the fly in a sense. So that's one thing. The second thing is Daniel Jones has a fumble problem. He came into the game in week 1 when the Giants were playing the Cowboys and he fumbled, I believe it was on his first or second possession. and then he had 2 fumbles against the Buccaneers. So he clearly has an issue with holding on to the football and ball security, right? I don't care if you're a running back, receiver, doesn't matter if you play defense. When you have the ball, security needs to be the number one thing. And so far, Daniel Jones has, shown that yes, while he can throw touchdowns and throw for 300 yards and run the ball security is something that he clearly needs to work on. So, and you mentioned Saquon Barkley, high ankle sprain, likely out 4 to 6 weeks. A lot of people are saying it's going to be the latter and he's going to be out way longer. So the fact that he doesn't have his best weapon, and they do have some hard opponents coming up. Only weapon, you're right. This is going to be an ugly year for Daniel Jones. Now, you can say you just throw him into the fire and see what he has and see if he can float. I am saying at this point, with 0 weapons around him other than Evan Ingram and Sterling Shepard, they're going to be a lot of bad losses for this Giants team.
No, and saying that, he's better than Eli Manning. But is he going to be one of these stout quarterbacks that runs the league like we've seen some other young guys do? I am not going to say that yet, and I have to see more games. If he does, let's say he does win a couple more games in the next coming weeks. Let me see if I can bring up their schedule because I do not know it off the top of my head. What's odd is they play Washington, but then it's Minnesota, New England, Arizona. That's not too tough. At Detroit, Dallas. So, that's what I'm saying.
It's probably going to be a roller coaster up and down.
Exactly,
right?
But there's a potential they lose most of those games actually. So it's, we'll see what happens. But let's pump the brakes on the Daniel Jones stuff. I know Stephen A. Smith wants to shout at the screen, and all the New York media wants to say we have a good quarterback. You already had Sam Darnold last year.
Yeah, no, you have a good quarterback. He's throwing to no one.
He's better than the guy you had. That doesn't mean he's a great quarterback.
Yeah, no, I think we can agree that we need to see more film on Daniel Jones.
Okay, speaking of a guy that almost got drafted by the New York Giants, Dwayne Haskins. Monday Night Football was one of the worst football games I've seen this year as far as a performance from one good team. I say good team because every NFL team is good, maybe besides the Miami Hurricanes. But it was surprising to me how bad Case Keenum played in this game. There was every opportunity to play Dwayne Haskins. I'll just form this question like this, Jared. When are we going to see Dwayne Haskins?
We should have seen him last night. And I'm sorry, there's people that
I agree. You saw. I said hashtag give Haskins a chance.
Let the dude in and let him play.
They had a chance in the game.
They need to take a page out of the New York Giants, their division opponent, rival, and put that rookie into the fire and see what he can do. We know what Case Keenum can do. Case Keenum has been in this league. He's been a journeyman quarterback. He's been on more than a handful of teams. And yes, it's been 3 games, and they're 0-3. And Case Keenum has proven, including last night, when you throw 3 interceptions and have another fumble and you get sacked multiple times. Now, the sacks are also on the offensive line, not just on Case Keenum. But he is making bad decisions, and he's not giving his team an opportunity to win. Jay Gruden says that he feels that it's Case Keenum's first year in this offense. He says that there's other, young players and it's their first year in the offense, so he doesn't want to pull the plug. He wants to give these guys a legitimate amount of time to get on point. But what I'm saying is we saw what the Giants did with Daniel Jones, and you guys obviously think very highly of Dwayne Haskins. Why not put him in and see what you guys are going to do? The Redskins ain't making the playoffs. The Redskins are going to be lucky to win 4 games this year, regardless of who the quarterback is. So if I'm the Redskins, and listen, here's another thing too. This isn't even just about football. That game last night, there were more Bears fans in the stands than Redskins fans, right? And that was a big issue that Jay Gruden actually brought up in his post-conference as well, saying, listen, we're not getting that home field advantage, and when the opponents are on the field on offense, they're not getting the false starts, and we're not making it difficult enough for the opponents who are coming into FedEx Field. So you want to give the fans a reason to come to the games and pay those expensive tickets and pay for a $15 beer and all that stuff. You put your rookie first-round quarterback in and see what he can do. Not saying he's going to come out and light it up, but at least it's a topic of discussion and a storyline, a way to maybe bring this team together and bring the fans together for that matter. Because right now the Redskins have absolutely nothing to hang their hats on other than the fact that they're undefeated and their arrow is completely pointing downward.
No, I agree. And I was saying during the game last night, although I'm a biased fan that wants to see a competitive game, Dwayne Haskins should have came in that game last night, especially when although they kind of came close at the end, they were within 13 points. I thought, give the guy a fresh start. If you can actually lead your team back in that type of situation where you're playing great defense, you're down by so much at halftime, just go out there and say, you know what, we understand we're probably going to lose this game, but let's just see what this guy can do. I'm not even saying you have to start him the next couple weeks after that. I'm saying, like the Giants did with Daniel Jones, put him in the game. Right? The Giants put Daniel Jones in the game against the Cowboys. That wasn't a horrendous blowout. It was a blowout, but they, in some ways the Giants still had a chance when Daniel Jones came in the game. So all I'm saying is do that. I know the guy's not ready, but that doesn't mean you still can't play him.
Well, yeah, and here's the thing. You put Dwayne Haskins in this game last night against the Bears. Next week, you can still start Case Keenum.
That's what I'm saying.
You don't have
play
to
the
start
Giants,
Haskins.
and then you play the Patriots, so you probably want to play Case Keenum in that game to not ruin Haskins' confidence. But then you got the Miami Dolphins week 6. So that's where Dwayne Haskins will probably see win that game. If they don't do all of this and they are 0-5, the good thing is the Washington Nationals are leading in the wild card race.
There you go.
And Washington still has something to watch.
So they've got something to watch.
Exactly. All right, so we need to move topics. We're going to end the podcast here. Switching to a little college football. The biggest game of the year happened this weekend between Notre Dame and Georgia. We're going to get to that in a second. I just want to go over what happened this weekend if you weren't able to catch college football. I know a lot of people are busy on some Saturdays. There were two other big games. Auburn defeated Texas A&M. Kind of did what they were supposed to, although it wasn't Texas A&M. Auburn's a pretty formidable team, so very impressive there. Wisconsin crushed Michigan.
By Michigan.
Yeah, who seems to
Jim
be...
Harbaugh.
I've been saying this ever since we started doing a podcast. Michigan, every single year, is the most overrated team. It's just because of the name, it's because of the stadium, and it's because of who their head coach is. Michigan should not be ranked after that game, and I'm just sick of seeing Michigan ranked.
Michigan is in trouble.
Yeah.
Not only on that front, the way that they got blown out when they were, expecting to at least compete in that game. Here's another thing too. Shea Patterson, their starting quarterback, even though he's more than likely going to play in this week's matchup, he got banged up, and it's not a
McCaffrey got
and their backup Dylan McCaffrey is in concussion protocol, and he is doubtful for next week's game. So if something happens to Shea Patterson, they're going to be on their third string quarterback, and we thought things were bad.
They're not known for quarterbacks.
We thought things were bad now. Just wait. So listen, I don't know how Jim Harbaugh makes it out of the year as the head coach. I mean, what more?
I think he'll stay the whole year because I think they'll end up no worse than 9-3 more than likely.
What more do you need to see?
No, I don't. I don't think he'll get fired during the season, but I think after the season they really need to look at it and be like, this man cannot win the big games. So what's the point of having a head coach that can't win the big games when you're always in the big games? Like, they always have a chance, and they're always overranked, so they always technically have a chance in the Final Four. They lose every time to Ohio State. They now get blown out by a non-offensive Wisconsin team. Who, are they going to beat Ohio State this year? There's no way.
Please.
There's no way. They have a freshman quarterback playing.
Please.
So it's just... It's annoying to watch every single year when this happens, and I'm sick of the Michigan Wolverines.
By Michigan. Probably the last time we talked about Michigan.
Yes. For the rest of the top 10, Clemson, Bama, LSU, Ohio State, and Florida all had easy wins, and Oklahoma was off. So the rest of it will stay the same. Real quick comment on UCLA. Coming back from 32 down against a ranked opponent, so it was an upset. So there's a reason we could talk about this. But did you get to see any of this game? And what are your thoughts on Chip Kelly and Mike Leach putting on what seemed like a fake Madden-like game this Saturday? Real quick, too. We always talk about Mike Leach being kind of this nut job in college football. Jared, he wasted all 3 of his timeouts with 8 minutes to go in the game. 8 minutes to go. They had no timeouts.
I'm going to say one thing about this. This isn't going to be about either team necessarily.
Yes.
This is about the Pac-12 as a whole. Pac-12 is done. Pac-12 doesn't have any chance of getting into the college football playoff.
Lost.
That would be Utah was their one and only shining hope, and they lost to an unranked USC team who the previous week had lost to BYU. So this game just showed that the Pac-12 is basically, in a sense, like the Big 12, where all they do is score and score and score, and there's no defense played at all. Washington State, you've got to be sick to your stomachs. You're a ranked opponent. You're at home playing against UCLA, who's gotten smacked the first 3 weeks of the season.
The worst
they
team
lost
in
to
football.
Cincinnati. They lost at home to San Diego State. And then, of course, they got whooped by Oklahoma, which we all expected. But for an 0-3 reeling UCLA team to come in and beat a Washington State team when you had, why am I blanking on the quarterback who came, Jacksonville quarterback?
Gardner Minshew.
When you have Gardner Minshew, who's the talk of the NFL right now, and he comes back and he's looking to support your team, and you guys lose 60 to, I don't even know what the score was. I just can't get my mind off the fact that this made the Pac-12 look horrible, right? USC had a good win and good for them, but this matchup, the fact that Washington State didn't come out and smack UCLA, it literally just sunk the entire conference. So that's what I take out of this game.
What I take out of this game is just, I mean, it's so. I don't necessarily even like watching these kind of games because it kind of turns like when I was watching the NFL the next day because this game ended so late. I went to bed after this game. I was like, when the Cardinals were playing Carolina, I was like, okay, we'll just throw the ball 50 yards down the field like UCLA did. Like it created a sense of fakeness for football that I don't just like ridiculous. To see. Interesting stats before we move on to a legitimate football game and two legitimate teams. UCLA was down 49-17 in the third quarter. They scored 50 points in the second half. 50 points, Jared. 50 points.
Washington State's defense as a whole. Coaches, players, just y'all need to be fired. Y'all need to be fired.
Washington State quarterback Anthony Gordon, school record 9 touchdown passes, 570 passing yards in a loss. And UCLA quarterback Dorian Thompson-Robinson, school record 564 total yards, 7 total touchdowns in this game.
This was like an all-star game. It was like a Pro Bowl.
It was.
The no defense play.
It was like the old hockey game, like the hockey all-star games that used to happen a couple of years ago, where it'd be like 20-17, and you'd be like, "This is not hockey. What are we watching?"
Can we get to a real game? I'm sorry, I never wanted to mention that. I know you're UCLA fan.
Well, it was the top call of football. It actually ended up kind of being the biggest game of the whole weekend just because of the historic ramifications of the historic.
Just
to say this too. 2 facts that I want to just say that don't make any sense and we shouldn't even say on this podcast that will probably get cut out. UCLA is now first place in the Pac-12 South, which is amazing to say, tied with USC. Also, I'm blanking on what else I was going to say, so we're just going to switch to Georgia.
Thank you. I'm glad that you liked.
23-17 win by Georgia. Very good game. Awesome crowd. Great atmosphere. Brought me back to kind of the older days of college football when we see a true home game.
Right. Oh, that crowd was nuts.
Because a lot of these games, and my dad even mentioned this when we were watching it, a lot of these games end up being like at the Mercedes-Benz Superdome.
At a neutral site.
At a neutral site, Cowboy Stadium a lot. So there's not the true atmosphere. This was, you're coming to play the Georgia Bulldogs, and we don't like you. And there was not a lot of Notre Dame fans at this game.
Yeah, there was like maybe 10%. I mean, 90%
which is
of the crowd
surprising
was...
because they travel well too. So, excellent game. Here were my takeaways before I'll let you say your piece in a second. Notre Dame looked very formidable, but Georgia looked like the better team the entire time. And it was kind of like, can Notre Dame catch up to them and make some great plays to win this game? In my opinion, Georgia does need to execute a little bit better down the stretch because they did give Georgia a chance. And overall, I do think Notre Dame kept their playoff chances alive by not getting blown out in this game. Beating the spread, like I said, I think it was plus 15.5 for Notre Dame in this game. If they hadn't beat that spread, which seemed like an easy bet for a lot of people, I think then you throw Notre Dame out of it. But this was a very good game, and Notre Dame still has a chance, in my opinion.
You said it exactly right. Notre Dame's playoff chances are still alive because they played well in this game, right? And in college football, it's not sometimes always about the wins. It's about how well you play and how big of a win you can get. Or vice versa, if you can keep the game close when you were clearly the underdog. And that's exactly what Notre Dame did. I think Notre Dame played well for most of the game. I also think Georgia didn't play as well. Now, Georgia lost. They were already out their starting cornerback before the game even started. A starting cornerback before the game even started. They lost another cornerback during the game. They also lost an offensive lineman. So they had some injuries, key injuries, that I think played a role in why maybe they weren't as effective as a whole team. But for the most part, you're right. I think Georgia's execution in certain situations was not what we expected from them. And in turn, Notre Dame took advantage of those. So I give Notre Dame a lot of credit for coming into that hostile environment. Brian Kelly even said after the game, he's like, man, last year when Georgia came into Notre Dame, he's like, I wish we had that type of home field advantage, right? So kind of giving a little shot to his home fans saying, we need to do a better job when we have home games. But no, for Notre Dame, their playoff hopes are still alive. Now what Notre Dame has to do is come out and not only run the table the rest of the year, they need to do just like I said and win by a big margin, right? Because it's not just enough for Notre Dame to win anymore. They need to win by double digits, blow teams out, and prove that, hey, we have one loss on our record, but look at the rest of our schedule and we blew opponents out. So if Notre Dame does not do that, if they're kind of just winning in mediocre fashion and they're not playing well, executing well, then I don't think Notre Dame gets in, because unfortunately that one loss is going to be a huge red flag. So they have to prove that we can win by a huge margin.
Yeah, they play, looking at this season, they play three technically ranked teams. They might not be ranked by the time they play them. Even next week they play Virginia, who's ranked number 18, which is surprising. So good, tall team, but like I said, beat them by 2 touchdowns, right? Beat them by 2 touchdowns, beat them by 17.
There has to be a big
21.
lead. This cannot just be winning by 3 or 7.
Exactly, and you have to beat USC and Michigan, because they are not the teams that they used to be or projected.
Where are
to
those
be
games played? Those USC.
It is It's at home against USC.
Okay,
so
and
that
at
should
Michigan.
absolutely be a win, and at Michigan.
Okay. Okay.
So
those are both 2 games that Notre Dame should win.
yeah. Tough games, but they should win. Duke is not the worst team this year. They have them in their schedule as well. Navy has competed, although they play a weird system. Navy always seems to give everybody fits. A nice blowout of Navy would be nice. Stanford's not competing very much this year, so that game at the end of the season might not matter too much. But like we're saying, if they go 11-1 and a couple of these teams like Oklahoma and maybe Ohio State lose some games, Notre Dame will have a chance in the end, because they proved that they can compete with Georgia and possibly win. One more thing on the Georgia home field advantage was that Notre Dame late in this game kind of ran out of time because they didn't have enough timeouts. They had to waste 2 timeouts because they were running out of play clock because of the crowd noise too. So that's where the true home field advantage comes in, and that's why I think we need to see more of these true home games for some of these teams. So that's what college football is about more than anything, is hometown fans, college kids going nuts and winning the game sometimes for their
That's a great point. I will say a lot of times these neutral site games happen at the beginning of the year.
Yes.
When it's teams that are playing each other outside of the conference, right? And as the season goes on, then you start to see the true home and away games. And then once the bowl games start, obviously most of them are neutral sites. So you see that for the first few weeks of the season. But now that we're into week 4 going on week 5, you're going to see true home and away games, which to me is the best part of college football. So that is it for today's show. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. Keep sending us your comments and feedbacks. That today was another jam-packed football show with a lot of NFL stuff in the beginning, and then of course we ended with college football. There are some not big college football matchups next week, but we will get into some of those games, as well as the NFL Week 4 slate. So continue to stick with us. Let us know what you want us to talk about, and we will bring that to you on next week's episode.
Exactly. Also, next week's episode, I don't know if it'll be on the necessarily episode, but we will be doing a MLB playoffs prediction show, considering that the playoffs will start next week.
That's right.
If you didn't know that, they do. I know there's been a lot of teams They have won their division races, so people have kind of laid off the baseball thing. But I think there's going to be a lot of good matchups in the playoffs, and there's a lot of really good teams. So we're going to talk about that as well, either on a separate podcast or on the podcast itself next.
That's right. Stay tuned. But for today, I'm Jared Smith.
I'm Nick Neal.
This has been the Cover 2 podcast. Have a great Tuesday, and we will see you guys next week.